were just talking a few minutes ago about how nothing is going to get fixed or solved in America until we have restored trust and honor in Washington. This is actually an event that I'm going to be doing at the Lincoln Memorial on August 28th, and you can learn all about it and volunteer to help or whatever at glennbeck.com. But Americans today, I think, they don't think this guy exists anymore. I think he does. I think he does. I think there are a few of these guys actually in Washington. You just have to look really hard for them, and they're alone right now. But this guy used to listen to God and used to listen to the people. He used to listen to his heart. Now people think this guy doesn't exist. They think this guy instead just listens to special interests, listens to care, listens and cares to show more concern about the members of ACORN or SEIU.
And I definitely welcome ACORN's input. You don't have to ask me about that. I'm going to call you, even if you didn't ask me.
Your ship has been on in the United States Senate before the big health care. I saw Andy Stern and SEIU members.
Did he call you? Did he call you? They wouldn't even listen to you at a what do you call it, a town hall meeting. He puts those concerns ahead of the average American. SEIU President Andy Stern visits the White House now more than anybody else, 28 times that we have on record. I'm not sure how Andy Stern is quite qualified for this, but there are now reports that the White House is considering this guy who wears a pinky ring. Never trust a man who wears a pinky ring. New Jersey, apologies. Florida, apologies. Never trust. They're thinking about adding this guy to the federal deficit panel. Now let me ask you, how does that make any sense whatsoever? Aren't union pensions one of the reasons that many state governments are facing massive deficits? Check out the state of some of the unions and their pension funds. In April, the SEIU National Industry Pension Fund, which covers some 100,000 rank-and-file members, SEIU, this guy, announced that its pension has been put into what the feds call critical status, or the red zone. In July, the country's largest union local, SEIU's United Healthcare Workers East, had to reopen all of their contracts for 145,000 members 2 years early, gave up all the raises, reduced the benefits for future hires. So the union could plug the massive gaping pension hole. Wouldn't it be great if they could just get some sort of health care that could take care of all of this? In 2007, they only had 74% of the assets needed to pay its benefits. Then you have these, the bigger plans operated for the Teamsters. All together have 59% of the reserves necessary to cover the pensions. 26 funds at the Food Workers Union, 58%. 7 locals at the United Brotherhood of Carpenters, 67%. Okay? Take a look at the funded ratios of 13 SEIU local pension funds from 1996 through 2006. I'm guessing it's worse than this now. Here they are. Here's where they started. All funded, almost 120% funding. Well, look at that. And now they're all tracking down here. The middle line shows the average trend. You see that union benefits are funded at about 90%. Here in 1996, but dropped to just about 60% funded by 2006. Got it? Why is this alarming? Because a rule of thumb, the government usually considers a fund to be endangered if it's below 80%. Critical status is below 65%. This requires them to come up with a plan to get off the probation within a decade. What is Obama's plan for getting us off of probation for our out-of-control spending? Because everything in the country looks worse than this. His plan? Hire the guy who helped create this mess. How does that make sense to you? It doesn't, unless they're just trying to pay this off. We're now seeing some pushbacks to unions and their out-of-control pensions. In San Francisco, a legislator there wants pension reform that would start with the changing of the calculation system for benefits. We told you about this last week. Instead of basing the pension on the last year of pay, where it's all padded, I guess they're going to compromise and say the last 3 years of pay. The most controversial of all, city workers would have to contribute 7.5% of their pay to retirement benefits. A majority of city workers already do this, but guess who doesn't? SEIU and the transit operators. They don't have to contribute anything at all. Can I ask you a question? Pension. For people who work for the state and the city, do you have a pension? Because I don't have a pension. I don't know anybody that has a... Do you have a pension? Do you have a pension? You have a pension? She's got a... I don't even have a pension. How do you get a pension? Most Americans don't have a pension. America, you're not going to be able to contribute anything to the pensions of union workers soon. We're all going to have to make our own way soon. It's crazy. That's kind of what the founders intended. There are two more people knocking at the door with their hand out, and wait until I show you in a minute the size of their hands. Two new people, Fannie and Freddie. You haven't seen anything yet. Next.
Opening the books on Fannie and Freddie. What would you find? Next.
With my mistakes. If I ever make a mistake, I want to tell you. I want you to hear it from me first. I've said for a while now that President Obama's fiscal policies do not create jobs. Let me correct that. His policies do create certain types of jobs, like those at a brand new facility near Chicago. And these are prime jobs, great benefits, big salaries, up to $202,000 per year. They are fabulous government jobs. More specifically, they're jobs with the FDIC. You know, those fine folks that cover your losses when a bank goes belly up. And wow, is the FDIC hiring for some unknown reason. Apparently, there's lots of work to be done in our new economy. They're now opening up a brand new satellite office in the Chicago area that spans 7 floors, over 100,000 square feet, and will hold 500 temporary contractors and employees. That is wonderful. I guess the stimulus plan did work after all. Another mistake I need to correct. This new facility is just the latest in a sort of trilogy, with other offices in Irvine, California and Jacksonville, Florida. Both gorgeous places to shutter a bank, especially this time of year. After each of these sites were open, they were closed, because they had large increases in the amounts of banks in the region that the FDIC closed, and so then they finished their job. It's almost like they're building places knowing that financial disaster is on the way. But it couldn't be on the way, could it? I mean, that couldn't be true because the worst is behind us, right?
1 year later, it is largely thanks to the Recovery Act that a second depression is no longer a possibility.
Oh, that's great. That's great. It was a close one. But the bank around the corner is the least of our worries right now. How about Fannie and Freddie? They've added $291 billion to the federal debt last year alone. Over the next decade, they're projected to be good for $389 billion in debt. You and I now are on the hook for a total of $6.3 trillion with Fannie and Freddie. And by the way, that's on top of the whole $14 trillion that we're on the hook for. Fannie and Freddie own or guarantee about half of all residential mortgages in the U.S. This is their liability. Yeah. I feel like I'm 12 years old again, but that amount of cash that Freddie and Fannie have at their disposal to dish out before 2012 is bigger than that number. It's called infinity. Theoretically, no limit at all. And the greatest part? They snuck it through on Christmas Eve when everybody was looking at chimneys, for the big fat man to jump out at them. At least we were in the giving mood. President Obama gave and gave again. His Office of Management and Budget handles all of these things separately so they don't affect that pesky bottom line, which is already the worst in history. Scott Jarrett, he's a New Jersey Republican congressman. He's now putting forward for the accurate accounting of Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac. From New Jersey. Somebody who's actually trying to do the right thing. Isn't that amazing? If we're going to own every single business and home in America, let's at least throw them on the ballot sheet. What do you say? Even the head of Obama's budget criticized the president for not putting the rescues of Fannie and Freddie in the budget. He said it was irresponsible. He said, quote, "The degree of federal control over Fannie and Freddie is so strong that we're incorporating them into the federal budget," except he didn't say that to President Obama. This guy said it to President Bush back when he was heading up the Congressional Budget Office, and now that he's at the OMB working with President Obama, that's really not a high priority. Don't worry, though, because according to Business Week, the government wants us to know that they, quote, "continue to be on track to release a statement in the very near future." Okay, well, not the near future, but the very near future.